So, good morning, everyone. So, we will be having a new lesson for today, which is about the different theories of language acquisition. So, you already know what is language acquisition. We have the first language acquisition and we have the second language acquisition. So, both of them are the process of learning the mother tongue language and the different possible second language. Now, we'll be talking about the different theories of this language acquisition. So, because even though we know that both processes are processes of acquiring or learning language, there are different theories or hypotheses on how a person can learn a language. So as stated here, we have for over the last 50 years, many theories has been created. Many people has been curious and has been thinking of how people acquire language. What are the different things that affect them? Or the different steps that one follows in order to acquire a language. But to summarize them all up, we have four major theories. So we have behaviorist theory, innateness theory, cognitive theory, and the interaction theory. So just a brief summarization of the four. So the central idea for the behaviorist theory is that children imitate adults. They correct utterances when they get what they want or are praised. So this was by Skinner. So B.F. Skinner was the one who created this theory or this hypothesis. And the central idea again is that the children, the infants, imitate the adults. And the correct utterances or the correct pronunciations or saying of words of the children are given an award or being praised, being very good, very nice, or nice job. Next is the innateness theory. So according to this, a child's brain contains a special language learning mechanism at birth. Now remember, language acquisition device. So that is similar to this. And the reason is because it was also theorized by Noam Chomsky. And according to him, still going to his children having the language acquisition device since birth. So, a child contains already a language learning mechanism at birth. So, from the beginning, a child already has some kind of part in order to learn language. Next, the cognitive theory by John Piaget. And this time, the central idea of this theory is that language is just one aspect of a child's overall intellectual development. So meaning to say, as the child develops, it is natural occurring that they will learn language because it's part of their overall intellectual development. Next, interaction theory by Brunner. So according to this, theory emphasizes the interaction between the children and their caregivers. According to this theory, infants learn from the people that are taking care of them. So very similar to behaviorists when the children imitate. But we will talk about that after this. So here are the four main theories. If everything that has been summarized, the different theories and the different models for language acquisition are just being compressed into a few major theories. So we have these four theories. Again, behaviorist, innateness, cognitive, and interaction. So for today, we'll be focusing only on the behaviorist theory. So behaviorist theory on language acquisition. So this is a stimulus-response theory. Meaning to say, this theory is all about the stimulus or what whatever is the reason why are we doing this, and the response. So what is our response? What kind of response are we going to have? And again, this was by B.F. Skinner. So, who's Frederick Skinner? Let's first talk about the only Skinner that created this theory. So, he lived in 1904 up to 1990. He was an American psychologist, inventor, social philosopher, and poet. He was a bachelor in English literature from Hamilton University. He has a master's degree of psychology from Harvard University, a doctorate of psychology again from Harvard, and he became a professor of psychology in, again, Harvard University. So here is the development of the behaviorism. So it first started with nativism from Noam Chomsky, evolving into functionalism by J.R. Fred, and until B.F. Skinner used the two ideas of these two men, these two theories, nativism and functionalism, and created his own theory, behaviorism. So here are the central ideas. So according to nativism, again, since it was by Noam Chomsky, language is innate. In functionalism, language is developed through simultaneous interaction and innate cognitive capacity. So, according to functionalism, language is developed by two means. One, it is innate, similar to what Noam Chomsky said. And second is that innate ability is being practiced by what? By interacting. So, two at the same time. Two processes are being done at the same time. And lastly, behaviorism, according to this, is language is learned through operant conditioning. So we have there a term, operant conditioning, in which we will find out what is it all about later. So behavioral theory. So behaviors such as acting, thinking, and feeling can be scientifically observed and measured. And language as a behavior is a set of habits acquired by operant conditioning and reinforcements. So this was done by B.F. Skinner and among others as well. But the one who started it all, or the one who contributed a big part of this theory, was B.F. Skinner. So, do you believe that language is a behavior, that it has habits? So for me, yes. Yes, I believe so. Why? Remember, language is not just what we speak, but what we show using our nonverbal communication systems. Our posture, our hand gestures, like what I'm doing sometimes with my hands when speaking, and so on and so forth. So it is really a set of habits. Even in verbal communication, we have some people having habits putting some accents in their speaking, like the word example, or so on and so forth. Okay. And according to this, those habits, like when I'm doing this, when speaking, are acquired because of operant conditioning and reinforcement. So we have two terms already, operant conditioning and reinforcement. So we will talk about it in the following pages. So language. According to this, language is a subset of other learned behaviors. It is a set of associations between meaning and word and phoneme, and statement and response. It is learned or conditioned through association between a stimulus and the following response. It is a verbal behavior modified by the environment. So, Again, language, it is a subset of other learned behaviors. Remember, we have nonverbal language and verbal language. They are both, or we have both habits of doing things in both regards. We have some habits in the nonverbal way, and we have some habits in the verbal way. So it is the association of meaning and word. So when I say love, what's my meaning for that? So word and phoneme, and the association between statement and response. So it is a learned or conditioned through association between a stimulus and the following response. So language is we are associating what we are feeling or what's happening around us, the stimulus, and we are trying to associate it with the proper words for us to say. So, the following response. Ano? And verbal behavior is modified by the environment. So, yes, of course, different situations, even though, let's say, having the same question, can have a different response depending on how the environment is affecting us. Language is the how of language is more important than what of language form. So a child learns language when relatively unpatterned vocalization selectively reinforced gradually assumes or assume forms which produce appropriate consequences. So let's focus here a bit. So a child learns language. So again, this is one of the theories in language acquisition. When what? When does a child learn a language? When relatively unpatterned vocalizations are selectively reinforced and gradually assume forms which produce appropriate consequences. So when the child is still learning to speak some words, a few phrases, or some sentences, so those sentences are selectively reinforced. So when we say selectively reinforced, we're just going to pick some sentences or some words or phrases, and those words, phrases, or simple sentences are being reinforced, are being etched into their minds, letting them learn those sentences, words, and being given appropriate consequences or rewards depending on their performance. Yeah, so we are now going to the definition of operant conditioning. So, operant conditioning. So, the strength of the stimulus-response bond determines the probability of occurrence of a certain response. All behavior is learned or operant. So, according to this, operant conditioning is the bond between stimulus and response. So, it determines the probability of occurrence of a certain response. So, meaning to say is that based on how strong we relate a certain event, a certain person, or a certain thing, the one we are going to use as a stimulus, to a certain response, to a certain reaction that we have, will determine how much will we say or we will do the same response over and over again to that stimulus or to that thing, event, phenomenon, or person. And all behavior is learned or operant. Correct. I believe that so. Our behavior is learned. We don't create our behavior. Remember, for example, if some of you are from Ibaba, mga taga-Ibaba daw, ano. So, there's saying many from Ibaba are really tough, really scary, or some sort. Why? Because of the environment. Many people there are really tough, of course, because of different things. Some are drinkers or drunkards. Some are maybe just downright used to the environment. Or some are doing some shady business. So, based on what are the things happening in your surroundings, so sometimes you will what? You will learn, or you will uh, gain their behavior, or gain their habits as well. For example, if the people all around you are smoking, drinking, so more or less you will learn how to smoke or drink as well. Why? Because you're learning from them. You're learning from your environment. Continuing. So, complex linguistic behaviors represent chains or combinations of various stimulus-response sequences. Behavior is modified or changed by the events that follow or are the contingent upon that behavior. Yan. So, complex linguistic behaviors represent chains or combinations of various stimulus responses. So, meaning to say, our linguistic behavior, the way we speak, the way we pronounce words, is the combination of the different stimulus around us. For example, what I'm doing right now, I'm your English teacher. You are my student. I am teaching a class. So that's my stimulus. So how would I respond? So I would respond as much as possible speaking in English. That's my response. So it is a represent chains or combinations of different stimulus and response sequences. And behavior is modified, can be modified or changed by the events that follow or the contingent upon that behavior. So, our behavior, our habits can be changed by certain events that may follow, or our behavior will change because of a backup behavior, backup plan. Oh, let's say you are prepared for a party, but that party got cancelled. How will you react? What's your plan B? So that is what we say a contingent plan B. So yes, behavior can be modified. So if a particular response is reinforced, it becomes habitual. Thus, children produce linguistic responses that are reinforced and loses those that are left out. So, if a particular response is reinforced, it then becomes habitual. Meaning to say, if a particular thing that you did, or thing that you said, or word that you said, is always being praised, or you're always being rewarded for doing that thing, then of course, because you're being rewarded or you're being praised, someone is saying, oh, you're so great, you're so very good, blah, 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 and so on and so forth, then of course, you're more likely to repeat it. Why? Because it makes you feel good. And why does it make you feel good? Because you get rewards and you get praised as well. And of course, the opposite is true as well. If you do not get praised, or you don't get any reward for doing such things, then you will not do those things. So, that is what we call being left out. So, similar with linguistic responses. For example, a student learns to, or a child, let's go children. A children learns to say opo, po, or thank you. So, because he is a good boy, what will the elderly people say? Oh, napakagalang, ang bait-bait naman, very good, and so on, and so forth. While, if they do not say those things, then they will not get praised. No one will say, ang bait naman, ay, yung galang naman. No one will say those. So, they will learn not to speak without saying po or opo, or always say thank you after doing or after getting something. So, let's go about talking in what we mean by a reinforcer. So, any event that increases the probability or occurrence of a preceding behavior. So, not just an event. This can be a person, a thing, and other feelings. So, that increases the probability of occurrence of a preceding behavior. For example, your son, your daughter, suddenly one morning when you woke up, breakfast is already prepared. They have already started doing the laundry, and they already finished the house. So of course you will say, "Oh, very good. Oh, here's a reward. You gave that child, let's say 50 pesos, 100 pesos, or a chocolate bar." So those are or that are the reinforcer. Those things. So it will help increase the chance of them doing that again. Why? Because they are rewarded. You rewarded them in material things. Although it's not just material things, just the simple very good or other kinds of phrase is also considered a reinforcer. As long as it increases the chance of that behavior being repeated. So we have different kinds of reinforcers. We have positive and we have negative. So when we say positive reinforcers, it benefits the person receiving it. So meaning to say, it helps the person gaining that reinforcer or reinforcement. For example, money. It will help that person. How? Get load, buy snack, and so on and so forth. So examples of this, so phrasing, repetition, frequent exposure, and what I have said, material reward. So praising, you're giving praise. Repetition, so if it's good for that person, repeat again. Let's say knowing how to say opo and po, very good. So repeating it will help that person. Why? Because it will help that person be humble. Frequent exposure. So if the people around that person is always saying po and opo to their elders, so of course that person will adopt that behavior as well. Next is the negative reinforcers. So when we say negative reinforcers, has no value to the person receiving it. Causes the recipient to try to escape from it. So meaning to say, these are bad things to receive. Or more or less, giving it another name, these are punishments or consequences if a person did a certain thing. So example is physical punishment. Let's say you punch your brother or your sister or someone and you went to your home, your parents found out about it. So what will happen? I'm sorry, I cannot think of this on how to say it in English. So kukuha sila ng sinturon o kaya ng walis tambo and pasin sa puwet. So yan, punishment, physical punishment. Discomfort and scolding. For example, you did something bad and let's say you cheated on a test. Yes, you cheated on a test. And for 3 days, your parents are always reminding you of what you did and how bad it is. So they're always scolding, "Oh, do not do this again, okay? Do not do this again. Or you will bring shame to our family," and so on and so forth for 3 long days. So criticism and scolding. So negative reinforcers, punishment. So Punishment occurs after a certain behavior has occurred. So, example, you use bad words. The F word in English, or the P word in Tagalog. Okay, so punishment is needed. So, operant conditioning. So, we now know, we're going back to operant conditioning. So, we now know what we mean by reinforcement or reinforcer. These are the things that are given to a person to make them feel good in order for them to repeat that good thing or say that good thing, or a punishment make them feel discomfort or make them feel shame if they spoke or they did something bad. So, going back to operant conditioning, so it is a complex behavior. And it is learned by two things, chaining and shaping. So, when we say chaining, it is a sequence of behavior trained in such a way that each step serves as a stimulus for the next. So, meaning to say, it is a behavior trained in a way that you know that if a certain thing happens, then it will be the cause of another thing, and that thing will be the cause of another thing, and so on and so forth. So, it is a chain reaction. So, next is shaping. So, it is a single behavior gradually modified by reinforcement or ever closer approximations of the final behavior. So, shaping, you're molding a certain response or a certain behavior. Why or how? Why? Of course, because you want that person to be good or to know what to say or what to do in a certain condition. So how? So it is the step-by-step giving of rewards, of reinforcements in their step-by-step learning. For example, learning a behavior. For example, a student or a child wants to learn how to cook. So, of course, the first step, you will ask them, okay, what's the first step? What's the first step? Get a knife, cut, and so on and so forth. So, you will, if that step is correct or not, so you will get a reward. And that reward is, let's say, a pat on the back. Oh, very good. Oh, and now, since they know that that is a good thing, they will understand that that's the proper step. So, you will now teach or ask them, what's the second step? So, let's say getting the chopping board. Or what's the second step? Or getting the chopping board. But the student did not get the chopping board. Instead, they got a plate. So, again, you will give a reinforcement. You will say, oh no, not that, not that. No. Oh, so, they will learn. Again, repeating that process again and again. So, chaining. So, they will get different stimulus in order to learn different responses, to learn the correct response, until connecting it to shaping, they will get the final product. They will learn the final steps. They will learn the final words to say in a certain stimulus. If a certain stimulus happens to occur. Ano? Thus, language results from the active role of the environment. The learner is secondary to the process. So, language results from the active role of the environment, meaning to say the environment, not just the trees or the weather condition, but the everything around them. The people, even the dog, let's say the dog, and so on and so forth. So the learner is just secondary. So because the learner is just knowing what is good and what is bad. That's the only thing they're doing. And whether they know what is good, if they know that's good, and the environment is giving the proper reinforcement, so they will know that it is good to repeat it over and over again. And if it is bad, and the environment again had an active role in giving a punishment, then the learner will not repeat the thing that they have done. So, operant conditioning, once acquired, a behavior requires only occasional reinforcement to be strengthened and maintained. So, meaning to say, once a behavior, a child has learned a certain behavior, no longer requires reinforcement all the time, no longer requires an award all the time. So then, they will always do this and only require a reinforcement sometimes, not all the time anymore. For example, they learn to say opo and po. So, you will no longer always give them or say to them, very good, good job, or ang galang mo naman. No, you will no longer say it always. Just occasionally, sometimes. And that's true. Have you seen a elderly person say always to a child, oh good, you are such magalang. Every time that child says po or opo when speaking to them. See? So, it's happening in real life, in a social context. So, speech sounds that are ignored are produced less frequently and eventually disappear. So, example, wrong pronunciations. You're pronouncing wrong things, wrong words. So, if, let's say, the word vague, V-A-G-U-E. I had one classmate that pronounces it vogue. I don't know who taught her that. So that classmate is a girl. I don't know who taught her that. But she learned from us that it is pronounced as vague. So, if a child or if a child is still learning how to speak and learns to speak or pronounce a word wrongly or incorrectly and was not given, since he was not given an award or a reward, then he will repeat it less. And since he will repeat it less and less, then he will eventually forget about it. Like what happened to my classmate. Since she learned, that the correct pronunciation is vague, she no longer speak or pronounce it as vogue. Until finally, she forgot about using the word vague and pronouncing it vogue. So when it eventually disappears, it is what we call extinction. So it is the process of decreasing a behavior without punishment. So, of course, not every time you need to have a negative reinforcement. Just don't react to a person. Be silent. Or don't give any good jobs or an award. Just be just be silent, like I said. So, since they did not get anything, they did not get awarded, no one said very good, they might think, so, I did not get anything from this, so I'm not going to try it often anymore. I'm not going to say it often anymore. So, without being punished, so they will learn that not to repeat it until it goes away forever. So that's what we call extinction. So, an example of operant conditioning is the Skinner's box. So here is our Skinner box. So we have here a rat in a small box. That small box has different functions. It gives an award, but also, see, we have pellet dispenser and where it goes, but also punishments. So we have shock generator, kukuryentehin, ano. So we have the different functions of the box as well. So the Skinner box, also known as, so if anybody asks what AKA means, it means also known as Operant Conditioning Chamber. So used to contain animals such as rats or pigeons. So this was the thing that Skinner used to observe behaviors, to know what is operant conditioning, and to create his theory, behaviorism. So, yeah. So, it is studying a behavior or conditioning or training by teaching a subject, more or less an animal, to perform certain actions. Like what? Like pressing a lever in response to a specific stimuli. So, the rat is always rewarded when the rat presses or pulls a lever. So, that's a positive reinforcement. Why? Because the rat is being fed every time that the rat pulls the lever, in which in turn the rat will learn that when pulling a lever, he or she will be rewarded. So, the stimulus is the reward, and what will the response of the rat be? So, of course, pulling the lever. Yeah. So, when the subject correctly performs the behavior, the chamber mechanism delivers food or another reward. And the mechanism delivers a punishment for incorrect or missing responses. So, let's say there is a conditioning. We have two lights. We have here two lights, red and blue. Every time that the red light would flash or would light up, the rat should pull the lever. So that's the thing. That's the goal of this experiment, for example only. To let the rat learn that every time there's a red light, the rat needs to pull a lever. So, of course, this is just the beginning. And sometimes the rat will pull the lever and it will get a reward of food. But since this is just a beginning, what if the blue light flashes, the blue light lights up, and the rat still pulled the lever? So, since it is an incorrect response, there should be a reinforcement as well. But this time, something that will not benefit the rat. So, it is a negative reinforcer, in which a punishment, more or less, according to our diagram here, is the rat getting electrocuted or getting shocked. Ano? Yan, the shock generator. If ever the rat made a mistake or a incorrect response. So the rat experiment. The rat that was placed in the box did not know what the lever was for at first. So the rat did not know anything at first. The rat pressed the lever, food eventually came out. So when the rat pressed the lever, food came out. So we have there stimulus and response already. So the stimulus, the food came out, or a food came out. The rat suddenly learned, oh, there's food here. And how will the rat get that food? If the rat pressed that lever. So now, the rat, when it gets hungry, continue to press the lever and get satisfied with the food. Yeah, so we have here the stimulus getting satisfied with the food, and its response is to continually press the lever when when it gets hungry. So, or what the stimulus is, when it is hungry, so it will be responded by pressing the lever. And again, a reinforcement or another stimulus is that it gets satisfied with the food. So this operant behavior, this is an operant behavior because this is an action that results with a consequence. The food acts as a reinforcer because it causes the operant behavior to increase. So of course, yes, the rat continues to press the lever because it knows that as long as it presses the lever, it will be fed. So that behavior increases. So operant behavior may come to the points of its extinction. So the rat continuously presses the lever and yet food does not come out. The rat will eventually cease on pressing the lever, thus stopping an operant behavior. So what if the food in the, let's say, food storage device of the chamber ran out, since the rat has eaten all of it already? And the rat still is pressing the lever, but this time the rat does not get any food. And since the rat does not get any food, he does not get fed, he does not get any reward anymore. So what's the point of pressing the lever? The rat will learn, what's the point? I don't get anything from this anymore. So the rat will stop doing it anymore. And this is what we call extinction. Why? Because there was no punishment, there was no negative reinforcement. But because of this, a behavior was lost. So extinction. So instead of punishing behavior, it is better to simply take off the reinforcers that cause the certain behavior. By doing so, the doer of the behavior will not see the value of his actions. Because the reinforcers have been taken away from him, the behavior will gradually start to fade. Meaning, for those who have sons, daughters, or just going, are having niece, mga pamangkin malapit sa kanila, if they are doing something bad or saying something bad, rather than scolding them or rather than hitting them, punishing them physically, just take away the things that they gained by doing that. For example, a child is always used to being very good. Yung sanay na sinasabihan ng very good. But because he did something or he spoke something, you stop saying very good anymore. You did not say a very good to him for 1 week. And because of that, he will know, or he will slowly know, that saying this word will affect in a way that he will get, or he will not get, a certain reinforcement, a certain phrase. And because of that, he will no longer repeat it. So, it is extinction. Yan. So, that behavior will gradually start to fade. So, for those that have brothers, sisters na may barkada dyan, na bad influence, right? So, rather than locking them in a room, taking their allowance, and so on and so forth, punishing them, try to isolate them. Try to, as much as possible, bond with them. Why bond with them? To take their attention away from their bad influencers. And since they will let's say for 1 year, their friends, they have friends that are smokers and drinkers. And for 1 year, you are able to separate your family member or the person that you're helping from those bad influencers. And so what will happen is that within that 1 year, that person will lose or will no longer smoke or drink. So it is similar with speaking as well. So behaviorism and language acquisition. So predictions and assumptions. So language acquisition, it is word learning and it is more complex. Mother has become discriminative stimulus. So SD. A stimulus in the presence of which mama will be reinforced. A bond is built between the referent mother and the word mama. Meaning is attached to the speech sound. So, word learning is much more complex. That's correct. There are different words and it may have different meanings as well. So, for example, we have here the word mother. Mother. Yeah. Mother is a stimulus. A stimulus in the presence of which mama will be reinforced. So, when the mother is there, yes, the mama is there, sorry. So when the parent, the mother is there and the child learns to call her mama, so there is a bond being formed. The bond of the meaning mama and how it is connected to the stimulus, which is the mother. So the stimulus is the mother when the child sees her mother, and what's the response? So the child will smile or say mama, and so on and so forth. And as long as that bond is being reinforced over and over again, so the child will learn to what? To say mama to the mother. Hindi inay, hindi tay, or ate, or so on, but the specific word mama. So language acquisition is more complex responses are learned through successive approximation. Language learning is based on learning, imitation, practice, and selective reinforcement. Longer sentences are learned through imitation and chaining. By hearing and imitating enough examples, the child learns word associations rather than grammatical rules. So let us just focus in these 2 points. So language learning is based on learning, knowing the words. How are we going to learn the words? By putting meaning to each word. What do we mean by mama? What do we mean by home? Because we may have 2 different definitions for home. One is a house to sleep in. One is a warm place to sleep in. We have what we call denotative and connotative meanings. So learning, putting meaning to the word. Imitation, imitating the words being spoken around us. So if the people around you are always saying po, opo, go, that person will learn to imitate, to use that words in their sentences. Practice. Practice makes perfect. The more time that you do something, the better you get at doing that thing. And of course, when you practice a certain thing, of course, nothing is perfect in the first place. So you're always continually improving. How do you improve? By knowing what are the correct things to do. So by knowing if you suddenly did a correct thing or said a correct word, so you are going to be rewarded. So you will be reinforced. But sometimes it's not good to always reward a person if they are going to say it over and over. So just reward it sometimes, not all the time. So that's why selective reinforcement. So by hearing and imitating enough examples, the child learns word association rather than grammatical rules. Correct. We learn our mother tongue before we talk about what is paksa, what is diwa, what is tuldok. But even before we know or we learn about those things, we are able to speak in complete sentences. I hear children around the neighborhood asking for money, mapengi, blah blah blah. But they are still in kinder. So they're not really focused, or they may not even be studying yet. But they already know how to ask for something, how to speak a complete sentence. Why? Because they associate the word with a meaning. So example, mama, or the parent, penge, asking, pera, o, i-associate it with the money. Ano? Yan. So, a child acquires grammar by learning these frames or chains in which each word acts a stimulus for the next. Thus, grammatical units are controlled by the surrounding words. So, we already know grammar. What is grammatically correct and grammatically incorrect. So whenever we see a incorrect sentence, that is the stimulus. Okay, oh. Example, the sentence, I are cooking right now. I are. So are. So should be am. So that we are stimulated. We have the whole sentence. And since we know what is grammatically correct, the whole sentence is the stimulus. It is a chain of stimuluses, helping us know what is the correct response that we should do. So the correct response that we should do is to correct the incorrect word. So change it to am. I am cooking right now. So grammar is developed through learning of structured phrases and sentence frames. So yes, that's why we have school. We learned what are the proper grammatical forms of sentences. Syntactic and semantic slots within each frame are filled by substituting words or phrases that fulfill the same requirements. Okay. Word ordering is learned as adults reinforce chains of symbols that are increasingly more adult-like. Early language behavior is not rule-governed but rather shaped by the contingencies of the environment. So, sorry. Yeah. So, word ordering, how we rearrange the order of words in a sentence, is learned as adults reinforce chains of symbols. So, how do we reinforce this? By knowing. How do we know? By studying. So, that are increasingly more adult-like. So, more adult-like, you don't need to get or to be phrased like thank you, very good, and so on and so forth when you correct a sentence. No. You, since you are an adult, you want to have a reinforcement suiting for an adult. So, 1 point or a correct mark. Okay. When if you're studying. So, unlike that, in early language, so, early language behavior, it is not ruled by rules or it is not governed by rules. So, when learning early language behavior, you're not learning because you know the rules. Oh, should be subject is first before the verb. No. Why? Because we do not know that yet. We are still children. We're still childs. But by the different contingencies, the different backup plans in the environment. For example, we said the sentence earlier, I am or I are cooking right now. So, the people in the environment will correct you. They will have, again, an active role in helping you develop the language. Okay, so children would make errors. So, complex linguistic behaviors represent chains or combination of various stimulus response. That's true. Sentences, long sentences, are a combination of different stimuluses. So, if you are listening to a person making a speech, so those are many words for you to give a response, to give a reply. For example, if a person suddenly squeal, or mispronounce a word, what will be your response? Will you laugh? Will you scold them silently? Let's say, mag-isa ka lang nagsasalita, mali naman yung sinabi niya. Anong connect? Mga ganun. Or will you just stay silent and continue listening or be open-minded? O, oo nga, sa kanyang point, mga ganun, and so on and so forth. So, behavior is modified or changed by the events that follow up or are contingent upon that behavior. So, what we earlier discussed. And errors would differ from child to child. Even though two boys might do the same mistake, they will have a different reaction to that same mistake. For example, if a child broke a plate, maybe his reaction would be to cry, while the second child breaking a plate again would go to his parents and already say, "Mother, father, I broke a plate, I'm sorry." Why? Even though the situations are similar, the reason is every individual is different based on how they were raised, how they were how the people around them are treating them, the environment they live in, and so on and so forth. So, yes, different factors affect the response of a person. That's why errors would differ from child to child. And because of that, the level of linguistic attainment would differ also from child to child. It does not mean that if I have a cousin 6 years old and you have a child 6 years old, that they know the same things. No. They will have different things that they will know, depending on the environments and the people around them as well. So yes, this depends on the frequency and degree of the different reinforcements. For example, the 6-year-old child with you right now, whenever he breaks a plate, or no, let's say whenever he cooks something for you, you always gives him you always say very good job, blah blah blah, or pays him for 20 pesos for giving you food. Well, let's say my cousin, the 6-year-old cousin, did the same thing, but I just ignored. I just took the bread. I did not even say thank you. So slowly, that my 6-year-old cousin, will stop cooking me food and will result to extinction. Why? Because I did not give him the correct response or the correct reinforcement. Next is, since this is a behaviorism theory, meaning it is not a proven fact. It is still just a hypothesis. So there are some criticisms. So limitations and loopholes. So children will utter words that even adults do not say. Why or how? When they get it from other sources. Like what? Television, radio, animals. So they may say arf, arf, or bow, wow, or bark, bark from. Why? Because they heard it from their dogs. Meow from the cats. Children would not know the duality property of language. So they will not know the different meanings, the dual meanings of language. Children would not know syntax. Yes, because they haven't learned it yet. Syntax. Retention of negative language. So, even though you're always punishing them, or you don't say very good, sometimes the children still remember some bad words. For example, tang, the F word, and so on and so forth. So, no reinforcement on abstract ideas. So, how can you give a reinforcement if they're only thinking of things? It's still in their mind. They haven't said it. So, abstract ideas. And highly dependent on adult control. So, they will only repeat a certain thing if the adults or the environment is doing an active role. If not, again, extinction occurs. So, in summary, so we have there the word, yay, it's almost finished. So, language is a behavior. As a behavior, it requires reinforcements or reinforcers, as well as, of course, what would be the reason for their behavior? A stimulus. They need a stimulus from the environment. Reinforcements may be positive or negative, primary or secondary. Languages can be unlearned by putting away the stimuli or the reinforcers. So, language is a behavior. And as a behavior, it needs reward. It needs reasons to do that thing. And those rewards can be positive or be consequences negative. And a behavior can be unlearned if you took away either the stimulus or the rewards or the reinforcements. So, here just a reference list. And so, we will end that lesson about behaviorism. Okay, so that is all. I hope you learned many things. Don't be afraid to ask questions. So that's all for today. I'm signing off. Goodbye, good day, and have a great day in learning.